So here we are. We're back for our second podcast. So we're coming off the heels of the release of Dialogues with a Mystic. So that was Easter that you released that book, right?
Yes, it was. It
Right.
was.
I'm excited about that book too. I think that's going to be something people are going to be using along with, initially the the books that I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours, the mysteries of the redemption, of course,
Yep.
and come to wisdom's door. So I think those three are going to be a compendium for people to build a solid foundation. But I'm really excited about the collections of books that you have done as well, that we talked about and touched upon last time as well.
Yeah.
Like the Mystic Captive and the Mystic Knowledge series, and it's so much wonderful material that we have that we get to discuss and get deeper into. But there's
Awesome.
also the release of another book by Casey Armstrong.
Yes.
What? Yes.
What?
Well, he wrote a book. Well, he was a producer, cast member for Howard Stern for
Yep.
many years. At least 7 years. I read somewhere 10 years, but another place 7 years. But they used a lot of his material. But he had a lot of struggles. He was hospitalized 53 times for substance abuse and depression. And so he started his own radio show at
Yep.
WMAP, World's Most Amazing People.
Yep.
And so he wrote a book called Simply Amazing, which was a bestseller. And now on May 1st, he's going to release a book called Simply Amazing Women. And is there 13 women?
13 women. Yes.
Perfect. 13
Yes.
just like the right thing, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I was able to get an advanced copy of the chapter that you are in. And what I really liked he has great questions, by the way.
Yes, he does. He is good at that. He's very good at bringing out details that other people might not think to bring out.
And then I loved because he sparked something in those questions that he asked to you that elicited answers that elucidated things in a way that I haven't heard you quite say it before. So I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear which ones you thought that way about.
Well, which ones would I say stuck out the most? It's nuances, because he'll ask something in a particular way, and it's something you've said 50 times in other interviews, in slightly different ways, but it would just go to like another level. So like, of course it escapes me right now.
Yeah.
I'll give you a specific example, but what do you take from the book that he's written, his path that he's been on, what he's bringing to the world right now? Like, what do you think about all this?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't know KC before. I only know him now. But I guess the real simple thing I would say about KC is, he embodies, what we're doing. It's the mystery of the redemption. He had a tough road. He went through a lot of different things, and he's turning it around, and he's focusing in a different direction, and it's amazing what God can do. And he has some very serious medical issues.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he wasn't given much time to live either.
What?
And he has major pancreatic issues. I don't know exactly what they are, but he was only given a certain amount of time as well, and he's already beat that. And when we had first been introduced while doing this project, he had asked me some questions about, because I talked about my near-death experience and the fact that I beat all the odds with my own situation, which was heart failure, cardiomyopathy, and then had an unexpected, kind of a healing. Well, I guess it's not kind of, it was a healing.
Right.
It's just kind of,
Well, that's one
yeah,
thing that you talked about. Uh,
yeah,
is you
but
talked about how your heart got smaller. There was like 3 different details of your heart where it just doesn't happen.
it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's there's and this is the way that the doctors explained it to me. There was a Catholic doctor who looked over my records because they were looking at it to submit it for, a miraculous intervention. And in the end, it didn't fit all the criteria because I was using medication and there were different types of things, and it wasn't a complete healing. I wasn't completely healed of everything that was wrong with me. And so but what she said is that you can't, what happens in cardiomyopathy and heart failure is the heart gets larger, it enlarges, it becomes like an old bald tire. So like when you have an old bald tire, this is the best example I've ever heard of, cardiomyopathy, and that's how they explained the condition to me when I first got diagnosed. Um, the heart enlarges, like, and rather than having like really good tread in your muscle mass around your heart, the wall's thin because it's enlarging and the wall's thin. The pump function reduces, so what's called your ejection fraction, it reduces. But you have several factors that alter in heart failure, and cardiomyopathy in particular, which ironically is the most common reason people will have heart transplants, is cardiomyopathy. And so what she said is that people can make progress on their pump function with medication, but what they have never been able to see happen with medication is you can't make, it's like taking a bald tire or a tire that's blown and it going back to normal size. It can't go back to normal size. On medication can't do that. The actual thinning out of the heart, where it becomes really, your normal heart thickness might be like one level, but as it enlarges, it thins out. You cannot undo that with medication. And I'm trying to think what the third factor would have been. But there was, like you said, there were a few factors that simply can't be done simply with medication alone. It's not possible. And those things happened in my case. So, my ejection fraction, which is the amount your heart pumps out, it recovered. And then, which that is something that can happen with medications. But my heart went back to normal size, which that's not medically possible according to what I was told. The thickening of the heart restored itself, which is not medically possible according to what I was told. And I'll just have to let you know if the third one pops into my head. But they're like little they're physical aspects that are the result of the heart actually enlarging and thinning out, that it's like you can't undo it. You know what I mean? You can't just take it back and undo it just by taking a medication. And so in my case, that's what happened. I know in KC's case, I'm not exactly, I don't want to say what his conditions are. I know they related to the pancreas, and they were very serious and terminal, but he was doing okay despite, what they were saying. And I just told him, you just never know what God has in mind. So just roll with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Roll with it.
I think he's really doing some great work with one of the most amazing people. And, he really talks about people who overcome adversity and overcome the odds and make something, really great.
Yeah.
Make lemonade out of lemons, so to speak.
Yes, he does. And one of the neat things, his mother is a really interesting woman. He featured her as one of the people in his first book, Simply Amazing. And she's been doing something, I think she's a teacher, I'm not sure. But she has been doing something overseas forever as a missionary. And I think she teaches. But she has been a huge inspiration to him. And he's seen her just, solid as a rock, this pillar of kindness and giving. And so he went through a lot of things himself. And like I said, I didn't know him then, but something happened. He kind of got hit with the health things. And he decided he didn't want to leave the world without putting something good in it, And sometimes, this is how God redeems us. You know what I mean? He allows us to go through really difficult things and bring ourselves back from stuff. In the holy teaching of Vimalakirti, which is a Buddhist text, one of the things Vimalakirti talks about is that sometimes souls have to go out into the ocean of the able to actually learn how to rein that in. And that is really true of many, if not most of us, that we must see and experience and learn from our own mistakes. But then, what makes a great human being is someone who can take those mistakes and turn it into a redemptive kind of moment for others and for humankind. And I think that's what KC is doing with his books and with his radio station. And he's taken a lot of criticism, and I think, whoever wants to criticize it, they can. I wouldn't listen to it. I don't. You watch God in action in people, and when somebody is trying to do something of value in the world, you step back and you make room and let them. You know what I mean?
Now, when you mentioned the Vimalakirti quote,
Yeah.
the Zoom kind of did a wow thing. Could you just repeat what that was that he said?
Yeah, Vimalakirti had said that it often takes the soul or a human person going into the ocean of passions, into the boundless ocean, of activity, so to speak. Vimalakirti was a Buddhist teacher. In order for the soul to actually become capable of then coming back in, and then literally gleaning from that actual experience, and being able to then take the wisdom of those actions and cultivate it into something self-reflective, something beautiful, and something that will actually help the soul personally discipline his own mind. And so we forget that this is not an uncommon path of the human person. This is very common. And Vimalakirti is very ancient. I don't know the exact time period, but even all the way back then, this is a very well-known process of human beings that we often, as part of our life journey, will find ourselves lost and astray amidst a sea of confusion and a sea of difficulty. But when we realize that we can take what we have in that place that we've come to and herald it, bring it back with us to the stilling point of calm, where we can cultivate it into some knowledge that can be utilized for our inner, the inner work that needs to be done, the inner rectification, which is
Mhm.
the work that we need to do. But sometimes,
Purification.
yes, not every soul is just going to, in fact, most of us don't. So, that's kind of the whole point of what Vimalakirti is saying, is that most souls, in some way or another, do need or do require, or for whatever reason, will go off into the sea of delusion,
Mhm.
and we'll do that. But we can take that experience of wandering off into the sea of delusion and bring it back with us in order to then allow it to be instructive, not only of ourselves, but of others. And it becomes a point of discipline, where we have the experience. you know how you know how our elders always say, I can't experience it for you. I can't, you know what I mean? I can tell you what to do, but you have to do it, and all those things. It's kind of like Vimalakirti is saying it in maybe a more spiritually sutra type way, but he's saying there are some things that some souls will have to experience in
Mhm.
order to fully, embody the knowledge of it.
Now,
Um,
some people will go into those passions, like a KC Armstrong, and be hospitalized over and over and over. It's like a train going down a track and it's going towards pancreatic failure. And then he turns it around, where the next person going down that same track doesn't turn it around. So, what is it, do you think, that separates some souls in this lifetime from taking a KC's path, or some people from writing it out and just passing on and then coming back again to learn those lessons over again? Do you think that it's because they came here and it's not their time, that they just had to come here and experience some of the Maya, as they say, and then come back again? Or did they blow a chance?
well, there's a few different reasons. Like, for instance, a KC is a perfect example of someone who made his suffering redemptive, not only for himself, but he is now in the active process of trying to make his experience redemptive for others. And so this is, and boy, am I getting slammed with energy here, the Holy Spirit thing coming in, which is that we all have that moment where we realize, and, we see this in many ways. We don't see it just in ways where someone does it and it's visible on a public level. We see this with people who have been homeless, who then decide that when they get back on their feet, that they're always going to be working or helping with homeless shelters or homeless programs. We see people that do this in unseen ways as well. This is the redemptive path. This is the redemptive way. Then we have people where they literally get lost in Maya, and literally they do get swallowed by it. And so it becomes their destruction, because they don't hear that still small voice somewhere along the way and hearken to it, where that gives them the opportunity to change that direction. And we talked last time, I want to go ahead and just re-emphasize, for someone who may be swimming in a sea of Maya. And, Maya, for someone who may not be familiar with the term, illusion, delusion, or just if you're in confusion, all you have to do to start the change is you turn inward and you allow God in. And so you're making a decision to let God come in and do something different, and then you become pliable to that, so you allow God to move within you. So yes, there are people who will take things like that, and they will grab one of these moments where the Holy Spirit is coming from above, reaching down, and they're like grabbing it. And I see, and I think we all see many times, many different stories of people who make it redemptive, um, in many different ways, and it's important to understand that that is not necessarily something that is, seen by all, because these are things also that you see in the choices that people make on a day-to-day basis. People make it redemptive in all sorts of ways in their daily lives. But then you also have those who are listening, and then they're trying to grab a hold of one of those moments, and eventually maybe they do, um, and maybe they don't have the strength to do something that's going to be giving back. They maybe all they have is the strength to turn their own path, and that's okay. If that's what they've got, that's enough. You know what I mean? But there's always going to be those who truly, and usually with it doesn't always, you have people where they're trying to figure it out, and it just turns out that it's too late, too much too late, too little too late. There's also the fact that there are people who never think the consequences are going to hit them, and so it does at some point, and so it's just over, or it's
Last time we talked too, it's like you talked about it's never too late. If you're 95, 96,
yep.
150 years old, it's never too late.
Right. And it's never too late in the sense that you can always turn back to God. You may not be able to, at the age of 95, turn back and recreate a destiny that might have been there for you at the age of 25, but you still can recreate another path, another inroad back to God. That's always available to us. What we're talking about, though, sometimes is that people sometimes do die in the middle of being out upon the sea of illusions, and that's part of, it's a bigger question where we go through the reincarnation story, and that makes it much more complex.
And since we're on the Buddhist context right now, I've heard it spoken in some Buddhist texts that it's very important to be in a certain frame of mind and connected to God in case we die at that moment. Because we don't want to die in a moment where we're swimming in Maya, so to speak.
Yeah.
But of course, as humans, we're always going in and out.
Yes.
Because this is all illusion. So it's pretty difficult in our world, surrounded by illusion, to not, be in it. Not
That's right.
it, but to be in it, there is that, back and forth. But to keep going back to the center and back to the connection of, the
it's the connection between what is real and what is not real, and that is that's it's a difficult question for people to understand. And as when you experience out of body travel, you do find that it is much more easy to delineate between what is real and what is not real, in terms of, because what we go directly to, you even go to people who have near-death experiences. We're going directly to what matters in the in the continuing role of our existence, and we know that that's love, and that's the relationships between us and other people, and it's also this continual purification that's going on here in these realms. And this purification is often rooted around us as well in some of our relationships and in the ways that we give and receive love as well. So when I say what is real and what is not real, 95% of what our world, our secular world, embraces as being real and meaningful and having purpose, and is in essence not really so. And that's where it can get difficult, and people have trouble with this because, yeah, we do have to deal with our physical construct here. We have to deal with the fact that we have to make a living, we have to take care of our physical needs and things. But there are so many things that we do here that are beyond what is real, and we waste a lot of time and energy that way. And so, 95% of what a lot of people are throwing energy out on isn't real. And so when you can start putting aside what matters, what does not matter, what matters, what does not matter, then you don't waste as much time and you are much more focused. And so that makes it easier, like you're talking about with the Buddhist center of where you want your spirit and mind to be at the moment of death. It becomes more and more easy to do that because you're existing in a different way. You're not carrying all of these things as real in the same way as you might have used to do, or that you might see that some people, especially people who have no interest in spiritual elevation at all, who really view what's happening around them as very real, they're going to have a lot of just it's like dross, it's just things that they're carrying with them that are not going to be helpful or assist. These are things that weigh you down in the end. So I don't know if I'm making that.
Oh yeah,
It's
because
hard to put into words in a.
before you jumped into that too, I was just thinking it's the lighting of the lightening of the soul.
Yes, it is.
Just getting rid of stuff that we don't need, that's not important, it's not necessary, that's taking
taking that to the out-of-body experience, as you would know since you've read the Mysteries of Redemption, when you start experiencing travel to the higher heavens, the purgatories, and the lower hells, a lot of where you go to has to do and what you become, because when you cross over, you're looking at what are you compatible to. So people think of it only as judgment, and there is elements of that. You're going to go through a life review, you're going to go through these things, but these are, as many near-death experiencers have pointed out, these are very often very self-directed experiences, because our own soul knows what we need to achieve, and so our own soul is taking us through them. But what happens then is your soul becomes compatible to where it's going to go based on how much it weighs, and sin weighs our souls down. So the more things we have that are attached to us that are either of sin, or as in Buddhism would say, fetters or cravings, things that
passions,
yes,
okay,
and things that we get attached to that are meaningless when you cross over. And this is one of the things you do see with almost universally with near-death experiences, is that if a person has a near-death experience and they remember it and they're going to come back, and reorder their priorities pretty strongly. And the reason for that is because they've been given that vision of what is real and what is a waste of time. Mm-hmm. And really, that's what we spend so much time on things in this world that don't matter at all, things that are wastes of time. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you see that with people of near-death experiences. We see that we are wasting time on things like vanity, greed, lust, sloth, even things like being lazy. Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
Envy,
yes, envy, jealousy, all of these things that have no substance except for as a dark, weighty thing that holds us down when we cross. They're not helpful.
Could you also say that these sins or these passions, these fetters, are portals into bringing our soul down?
Mm-hmm.
So you could look at them as portals. So if somebody is I've had struggles with lust, for example. So that is like a portal, a dark portal sort of for my soul. So I could literally just take my soul all the way down
Yes.
if I continued down that path with passion.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And what happens, what happens is that our primary vice, in your case, lust. In my books, I talked about how lust was a big one for me. I've known people who have had really strong attachments to greed, things like this. They become the behavior and the attachment. Mine was also vanity, which is,
Mm-hmm.
kind of lame, but
I made that one too. But I was
uh,
looking at the seven deadly sins as they're called, and I'm like, yeah, I pretty much got all those.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
me
we all,
too.
yeah, but there's
It's
some
like,
that just more like, would be
yeah.
drinking. I grew up in Wisconsin. We had that conversation, and people drink a lot of beer, eat a lot of cheese. So would that be gluttony if I drank too many beers?
Well, it can be.
And,
It's all about, and this is where the self-discipline is coming in, the moderation, you know, um,
because that's what I want to talk about is we have these seven deadly sins, and then we have the seven virtues. And
yes.
these are seven deadly sins, but of course there's hundreds and hundreds, right? Or thousands. But for like the seven main ones, let's just, since we opened the can of worms of lust, okay?
Okay.
So, and you've had a lot of spiritual counseling with people who've had that. It's not too uncommon. It's probably the strongest, primal energy that we have here on earth, is because we want to propagate the species and keep the world going. And so it's a very strong desire, and it's been used, in religion, and kind of skewed and turned around, and there's shame involved to it. And it's connected all the way down to the bottom of our spine. So, it's a part of us. And if it can be moved in some way, in a way that makes us not feel good about ourselves, it's kind of like a core thing within us. But then, having said that, what is the virtue then that could help us with that particular deadly sin?
Well, what happens with, and it's interesting you bring that up, because yes, you're right. I've talked to you about this before, that ironically, lust is one of the most common. Our Lady of Fatima had said that that was one of the most, I think at the time, it was the most common reason for souls to be in the higher levels of hell, which, that has kind of like a oxymoron there, but so I don't know if I said that right, but so we know that this is a real common problem that people have. Part of the reason for this problem, and the irony about this, is that in the book that I'm also working on right now called The Lord of the Redemption, which is the third in the Redemption series, I'm going to be talking a lot about the divine feminine, which I'm going to have to let that one, you'll have to be patient on that one for when it gets released. But
So
the
Christ of the Redemption, and Mysteries of the Redemption, and now
well, we have the limb of the redemption,
the limb of the redemption. Yeah.
the Christ of the redemption, and then there will be the Lord of the redemption. And the Mysteries of the Redemption is a separate series, ironically, but yeah, they all work together. But what it's going to be talking about is some of the visions that I've had into the divine feminine, and how when we reach the level of what we understand here on earth as the highest level of the expression of God, which is shown to me as Christ's crucifixion, there are levels above this that we haven't yet tapped into. And it has to do because the crucifixion is the death. That's the death. And so if we remain, I had this beautiful vision. I'm only going to tell you part of it because I'd have to go into a lot there. But this part of the vision, I'm being shown, it's like I'm looking a overview, and I'm being brought down to see it's like a star map of the understanding of humankind about God and how it evolves. It's like, so I'm looking at this map and there's this lighted path that's leading through it. And there's all these steps along the way. And then the high point on the map was it comes up on this, and it's holographic, but it comes up and it's the crucifixion of Christ. And it's, all in light, and it's beautiful, and the feeling is just so holy and awesome and transcendent. And I'm just sitting there in awesome, glorious splendor, and what I'm told by the angel who is taking me through this is that if you stay there, and this is a perception of our perception, our understanding, because it's important people don't misinterpret this. If you stay there, you're staying with the death. That's the crucifixion of the Christ. And so if you don't go above that, you're not going to the renewal, which is where then you have the feminine energy comes in. And I saw this beautiful, it opened up above the crucifixion, and we're seeing the Holy Spirit as Mother, God the Father, this beautiful coming together of the energy and the creation. So the crucifixion is, in some respects, that's the purification of our soul. But once we clear it out, what are we going to do with it then? Because we don't want to stay with death. We have to renew new life. And how does that happen? We have to go to the next step. So we have to take our understanding of God higher. We have to understand God as creator, and God with the feminine, because there's something missing, that this is something that's been taken out, which is forgetting that there is a reason that there is masculine and feminine energy, why the feminine energy is part of the Holy Trinity, why it needs to be so, why we don't want to remain just focused on death. It's because we have to renew, we have to reconstruct, we have to rebuild. Beyond purification is another creation. And this is where we're heading. And because I'm writing it now, I can't give all the answers because it's being, I'm being formed as I speak, but it's this beautiful understanding that we have to come to, which takes us beyond just focusing only on the death. So we have to undergo this crucifixion. And this crucifixion is the crucifixion of the old self, the part of our souls that is not going to carry us forward. But once we achieve that crucifixion, we don't want to just lay there in death. We must then reconstruct. We must go back into that creative, because we have to recreate. If we don't, we're going to stay in death. And that holds nothing new. That takes us nowhere. We stay still in death. We have to go back into creation again. And so it's tough. It's kind of tough writing it. It's hard to put it in words what I'm being shown, but it requires, and I'm getting really slammed with energy, it requires us to go further, to realize that everything that passes away requires something that must then be born. Everything that passes away requires something new that must be born. And so we can't stop there at the crucifixion. We have to take it again back into creation, where it will be renewed and recreated. And that's where, these, ironically, people who have the near-death experiences, and those of us who have the out-of-body experiences, we also talk about that that knowledge of God that comes into us when we have these experiences. And this is what you're seeing. This is when you are allowing that consciousness of God himself to recreate you into a new creature. But we have to allow him to do it. And we have to allow him to do it in the way that he does it, not the way that we think it should be done, based on our own, formulations or dogmas. We have to stand back and, spread our wings and let God do it the way he does it. And one of the biggest constrictions we place on ourselves as souls then is we have so many ideas that we use to stop it here or stop it here or stop it here. And that is not what we are supposed to be doing. Whenever we reach a pinnacle, we want to start moving towards the next pinnacle. We don't want to stop. There is no pinnacle in this lifetime that we're not going to want to seek beyond. We don't want to just stop ever. That is the nature of what we are as soul and what we are as creations of God, because creation continues to create throughout infinity. And so we don't want to, just start getting comfortable with just hanging out in death. That's part of our process. But we've got to get with it that we are going to then also have to be jumping back into that flow of the spiritual energy that recreates us. Without that, we just kind of become stagnant.
I get it. So we've said, we've made these little vignettes. Excuse me. And so I like it because we take little segments of what, we talk about, and then we put it into something that's kind of, nice to look at, but it's just talking about, a certain aspect of this kind of work and knowledge and spiritual growth. One thing you said was knowledge is vibration.
Yes.
Knowledge is vibration. So in talking about, the path to continuing to go to refine our vibration and go into these higher and higher realms is purification, right?
Yes.
Rectification. And so we were talking about the 7 deadly sins, and that's kind of a way that we lighten the load so that we continue to these higher spirits, higher places. And so we were touching upon lust first.
Okay.
I want to, as a, speaking of vignettes, is I kind of want to have a vignette of each of the 7 deadly sins. And then what is the accompanying virtue that can help us with that deadly sin, to help us to purify ourselves, to help us go into the higher realms. So with lust in particular, what virtue could assist us with that to help refine our soul?
Well, I'm going to, go off the top of my head because I don't have any books in front of me, but I believe that would be, and the thing to keep in mind as well is that with this exercise, you can have more than one virtue that's going to help you with any one of your vices. But with lust, you would probably look at prudence as one way of countering that. Definitely. Piety would be another.
Okay, can you define prudence and piety?
Well, prudence is definitely let me look it up to do that better.
Sure.
Cautiousness, the quality of being cautious. That makes sense. Did I lose you? Let me see. I lost my screen. There you are. So it's like the quality of being cautious, because what lust has a tendency to do is there's this rushing current of, a lot of times with the vices. Well, depends on which vice, because some vices will like grab you in a vice grip, like greed and avarice. And then some things like lust, it's like a rushing energy that very fast moving and stuff like that. And that's why prudence, which is, disciplining your mind in the way of cautiousness, thinking things through. One of the things that I work with my spiritual counseling clients on with this is a questioning process sometimes, where you actually question yourself about what your attractions are. And so if it's in relation to a particular person, you ask yourself a lot of questions to determine the nature of your attraction. So, and that's assuming you don't know if it's lust, because a lot of times people will self-justify. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't lust. Sometimes there's something more there. But then, sometimes people think it isn't that, but then they don't, when they really question. So they have to ask themselves about, what is it that I admire in this person? What is it that I really see long term in terms of compatibility? And you just really have to do those types of questions to determine. And a lot of times you do come down to, it does bring it back to, this is probably some type of a lustful attraction. A lot of times it brings it back to that. Because if you look at the nature of your life, okay, so if you have children, okay, how does this play into your situation with your children? If you're single or married, if you're a lot depends on, you know what I mean? So the questions vary, but you have to ask yourself the questions: how does this person fit up with my own goals in life, my own moral uh, my own moral goals, my spiritual aspirations, my the things that are important to me? You can really find out a lot more about, is this a physical attraction, or is there something more to this? And that, we also have the issues that do arise with people having memories of people that are karmic and can arise, but a lot of times even having past lifetimes with another person doesn't necessarily change it from being a lustful attraction versus not. It just depends on what type of connection that might be.
And what about attachments? Could somebody be having lustful thoughts, feelings, urges because they have some type of uh, being that's connected to them?
That can happen. Yes, absolutely. You can have the incubus, the succubus. You can have the gulls, which are the the negative sexual energy. And there's lots of other things. You can also have lustful attractions to people because other people might be projecting something towards you. You may not even be aware of the fact that you could also be projecting something towards another person. And so, because our thoughts are very powerful and they are things, these all come into play. Yeah, definitely.
So how do you protect yourselves? Protect yourself if it's a succubus or incubus or something of that nature?
A lot of it is prayer. It's prayer, and it's ironically a lot of prudence, which is the practices of evaluation. Piety I mentioned as well, and piety is practicing your faith in a way that puts you in a protective space. Part of the reason practicing your faith does this is because you are, first of all, practicing more prayer. You are doing practices that literally are putting you in a protective, energetic place where you're going to have more natural discernment because you're actually cultivating it through the spiritual practices of your own particular faith. So, you know, a lot of prayer is very necessary in all of this.
So each one of our podcasts that we do, I want to touch on one of these 7 major vices.
Okay.
And so last time we did vanity. So
okay.
we did last. So next time we'll see what comes up. But I want to touch upon spiritual warfare a little bit.
Okay.
Now we both know are aware of the International Academy of Consciousness.
Yes.
And so they work with out of body, working with your energies. And I studied with them for a few years, and some good people and some good stuff. One thing that they said, I want to get your take on this, is that we all have about 8 or 10 beings around us. Each person, each individual. And whether that be, and they call them helpers, but there can also be negative beings, I suppose, around us, or, you know, attachments and such. And so in regards to that, and, you know, people who are of the light and people who are of the dark. So the dark people, maybe they have some beings around them that aren't so positive. And those negative beings are trying to bring some negative stuff on earth, or to the ground, on the ground, as you say, right? So is there kind of like an astral war going on here with the earth? And could we, like, through our prayer and such, help in this battle to create, you know, giant light armies to overcome the dark, or help persuade them to see their faults and how they can turn things around?
Well, we can definitely move in that direction, but the thing I would take what you said a lot further, which is that every one of us definitely has dark stuff around us, not just, you know, just people who are obviously dark. There's a huge battle going on, and we're entering into a period of time that may very well be pivotal here. And one of the things that I think is interesting, I remember having several people who had near-death experiences who couldn't see spirits before they had their experiences, and then afterwards they could, and, you know, they could just see that. And several of them would talk to me about how overwhelmed they were with how many demons are just, you know, all around us. And I think people think that it's much less common than it is. We're literally completely infiltrated by dark forces. All of us. We all are. I'm sure there's one somewhere in this room, if not more than one. Those of us who are trying to maintain the light, believe me, they're around, because they're going to try to make sure they take you down. And, you know, we are, no, we have decimated the, you know, the principalities and the powers of darkness have completely taken over this world. And you know, I suggest to people who are interested in learning more about what's going on with all of this, consider, let me just make sure I get this guy's name right. I don't know. His name is Father Michel Rodrigue. He is an exorcist, a mystic, an abbot, and a priest. And he's also the apostle of the end times. And he is releasing many of his visions that he's been having for 20 some years. And I believe this guy is completely legitimate. And he's corresponding with many of the things I've been shown myself, but much more. And he talks a lot about this issue in and of itself, which is just the very fact of how the demonic has overrun, you know, the earthly realm. And so it's much more than that. And you know, we don't realize how far we have fallen as a world in terms of the darkness. So, you know, when people hear that, they might get kind of depressed. So I'm just going to say, one of the things he says is focus a lot on the Chaplet of the Divine Mercy, which is, a Catholic devotion. You can look that up online. But so consider that if you're Catholic. If you're not, you can still do it if you want. But there are, the biggest thing is prayer right now. Is, we need a lot of prayer to get us through the trials to come. And the real reality here is, if you look at all of the Marian apparitions for the last 200 years, they've all talked about this coming time, which we're dealing with, but they've all also said that if enough people would pray and pray the rosary, and if enough people would turn towards God at these times, that these trials could be averted. And so we've been repeatedly told that if enough of us will pray, that some of this stuff could be stopped from happening. And now we know in the Bible that in Nineveh, that happened. The king and everyone in his kingdom put on the sackcloth and ashes, and the judgment was redeemed, and they were not hit. So we have to think about the fact that, we do have the ability to participate in things that are redemptive and helpful at this time, and if we do that, then we are at least participating in the restoration or the preservation of the light as we go through whatever it is that we're going to go through. Go ahead.
How do we, I have two questions. First off, so in regards to praying, what would you suggest how people could pray in the best possible way? And then secondly, when I just brought up armies of astral beings, and that may sound like, like what? But, it's talked about in the Bible and stuff, the armies of angels, and we know the armies of darkness. And are we unlimited beings that can pray for these armies of light beings to help us to, I don't want to say even conquer, because these dark souls too, they can, sometime down the line turn it around, and
yes, it
it's not
can.
about destroying them, but it's just about, helping the people that want, or the souls that want to shine bright and be in, in glory and love, and to allow that to be, and not let the armies of darkness to bring the souls down. Can't we pray for these armies to assist right now and just
yes yes you can pray the things I mentioned, but another thing that I think is really helpful is because many of us do not know what we are attached to. And this is something that I do. There's actually on YouTube, hopefully it'll stay up, but it's been up for several years, so hopefully it stays. But there's actually an approved exorcism, an approved Catholic Latin exorcism on YouTube. One of the things that people can do is even just letting that run in the background and participating or listening to it, getting holy water, and renouncing Satan, renouncing all his evil works, even going through the baptismal promises for those who are comfortable with that, who are Catholic or Christian in any way, anyone who's comfortable with it. What that does is, I've had people, clients who have demonic attachments that they're not aware of, and we're able to get those detached by having them do some things like this, because they don't want to be, they just don't realize it. So we create the opportunity there. On our website too, we have readings from the Catholic Rite of Exorcism. You can use that too. And a lot of people have a lot of success with that, in terms of if you have any kind of attachments, or if there are any in your home. If your kids have them, your spouses have them, You can play these things in the different rooms in your home, and it will sometimes reveal it to someone in the house what you may have going on, and it gives you the opportunity to more specifically work towards the purification of those things. The thing to keep in mind is that we've allowed a lot of demonic presences into our earthly sphere, which includes the astral realm and stuff like that. But in the cleansing to come, the goal will be to get them out of here, the demonic spirits. That's but the goal would be to get whatever attachments they have to human beings detached, if at all possible, because people can absolutely and can and do turn, oftentimes just by becoming aware of the possibility that they might have some kind of unknown attachment. And it's not that hard to get an attachment, if all we have to do is become kind of lazy. And this is where sloth comes in. You know what I mean? If we become slothful in our spiritual practice, we can become completely oblivious, if greed has become our god. Or, one of the ways you look at these 7 deadlies is, what is your god? What is first and foremost in your life? Now, we've talked about lust and vanity. So people who have lust issues can often recognize that, lust is my god. This is the thing I pay the most attention to. You know what I mean? Or vanity. It's more important to me what I look like or what people think of me than anything else. That's my god. And that's a clue to you. What are you literally worshiping? And there you've got your first clue. You can also, for those who might, my stuff, my money, my this, my that. Okay, so your greed is your god. You know what I mean? People can be unaware, but it's not that hard to try to spot it. What is it that is the most important thing to you? Your money, your name, your your lust, you know what I mean? If you're just being truly honest with yourself, you might be able to pinpoint it a little bit. Sloth is another one too, because people don't realize sloth is also a deadly sin, and the reason it's so deadly is because it leaves people sitting still. You were talking earlier about staying in place with death, but sloth does the same thing. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do the work required of me to move forward. A lot of times people who are involved in sloth will find themselves spinning. They'll be doing lots of totally pointless things, and it makes them have this false perception that they're doing something, but they're doing pointless things. So they're really not doing anything, but they do whatever they need to do to give themselves a false perception of doing something. And so there are different ways that we can self-delude ourselves, and we all do it. We're not, none of us are beyond that. We all do it. And like you said, if we're totally honest, we see that, we have a little bit of all of them in us, but most of us will find that we have propensity towards 1 or 2 at the top, and we're like, oh, that's my fave. Uh-oh. Yeah. And that's, it's very important, because we don't oftentimes even realize how serious that is. Ironically, let's take a look at, you're in Los Angeles, where Hollywood and the movie industry, where name and fame is everything, and how things appear, what people think of you. Well, that's all vanity, and that's all That's what Satan was about. You know what I mean? And then we have to remember too, what was the lie in the Garden of Eden? The lie in the Garden of Eden was that you can be as gods. And so how do you make yourself as a god in your own life? In Hollywood, we can see people, it's an easy example. So I'm not picking on Hollywood people. It's an easy example because you can do it by focusing on name and fame. How do we do it in our own individual lives? How do we make ourselves as God? We do it by our greed. We do it by our lusts. We do it by even in sloth, it's like, well, I don't have time for that today. I have other things I want to do. You know, I'm trying to think of some of the other deadlies, because you can really pull this out when you see, well, how do I make myself a god?
Well, you know, just talking about Hollywood, have you ever seen the show American Idol?
Yes.
These idols, it's idol worship. It's these
Yes.
famous people on the tabloids. It's these stars.
Yes.
You know, and so, you know, nobody knows more than me about, you know, the vanity. And when I remember reading a biography of Dustin Hoffman, autobiography, he said, I wanted to get girls. So, yeah. And
so his might have actually started with lust.
right? He's done a lot of great work. You know, I really admire his work. But you know, so coming to a place like LA, I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be one of those idols, because then it meant that I was somebody, right? That I was important, that I did something with my life. But there's this whole, you know, cult of, you know, they talk about some of these people have like 130 million followers, you know, like Katy Perry or, you know, Beyonce. Just, you know, they're worshipped.
Yeah.
And thou shalt not worship false idols, right? But
right.
I read this book called The God of Renown. Have you ever heard of that book?
I have not, but that makes sense.
It goes all the way back to, like, you know, Caesar being on the coins and stuff, his face, you know, and just all the way same throughout time, right? Even going back to the pyramids, and we go to pyramids, and, you know, on the temple walls and such. But this fame is an addictive thing that kind of makes someone like a god, and people go along with it and they follow that like they are a god because they're famous. Like, oh, you know, I'm intimidated because, you know, whoa, he must be somebody here. It's an interesting trip.
Well, and the reality is that there's only one person who got out of here alive, and that was Jesus Christ. And the rest of us are going to, you know, die and be buried 6 feet below, or, you know, whatever they call it when they burn you.
We made it.
Yeah. And, you know, the reality is that none of us are those things. And that is the worst possible thing we can do to ourselves and to others, because we have to be pointing people to him, because there is only one God. And if we think that, you know, if the reason people are following somebody like a Beyonce or whatever, I don't know what, you know, I like Beyonce. I don't follow her on any media, but I mean, I think she's incredibly talented. And so I'm not familiar with all of her music, but I've seen her on the Super Bowl halftime show once or something. But anyway, you know, I like artists too, but the point being that things need to have a proper perspective. And God is, and we aren't, you know, and that's, you know, that's when we come back to the idea of what is real and what isn't. And God is real, And we are impermanent, we're temporary. We're just a little personality in a body that's going to rot, and we're going to die, and no one's going to remember us, and that's okay. And but what is preferred, it's okay if, but it's not, it's preferred that we make good use of our time here spiritually for him, because he's given us this opportunity for that reason, which is what is real. He didn't send us here so that we could be, putting a lot of time and energy to being beings of renown, or, so I could do something with my face, or, or I don't know, I have to think of some things, you know what I mean? It's where we're putting our time and energy in a way that will be an eternal use of our time and our energy.
I wanted to bring up too about that is because it's such a distraction.
Yes, that's right.
To follow these people, and of course, I'm all about artists and entertainment, and that's great. But that's what it is. They're not gods. They're not somebody to bow down to. It's great. It's cool. It's part of life. But that is what kind of happens, and that does become people's gods.
Well, and the thing here too that I can say, even just from just the artistic side of what I do as a writer, is that part of the reason I love art and that I honor art and music and things like this is because I know from whence it comes. And I know that myself as the writer, that I don't do any of it. The only thing that I do is I try to move out of the way and not be slothful, because I struggle with that sometimes because it gets tiring. But I try to stay out of the way and let it come in and just be, as Saint Therese of Lajoie said, being a pencil in God's hands. So that's what we try to be as artists of any kind. And if we lose that perspective, we really run the risk of losing that gift, because it isn't our gift. It's something that is borrowed to us for a time, but it's still coming from him. This is not ours. We don't own it. It's something that's been gifted to us for this time to use as well as we possibly can to, embody his glory, And so we have, and I'm getting really slammed with energy, but we want to remember that that's what we're trying to do, even with our gifts. And, when we look at someone who is, really gifted, we want to see that gift in that perspective and in that context of that is a beautiful gift. And, we hope they use it worthily and well. And this is where, this is another way where we come into envy, which is, I talk to a lot of my spiritual counseling clients about envy, because they talk about, well, I wish I could be more like this or more like this. And it's like, but how would that in any way enhance who God has made you to be? Because, even, we all have this place that God has asked us to fill here. And so we can look and honor and be astounded by the beauty of another's gifts. And we can appreciate it and be like, wow, that's, and all those things. But we have absolutely no reason to envy it, because there's no way that God could embody all those gifts in one person. He has to give each of us something that we must do, our little corner that we will fulfill. And so when we can recognize that, it's exciting to see other people who are fulfilling these aspects of things that we cannot do. And that's really neat, because we get to appreciate and see it and hear it and read it.
And feel it.
And feel it. Yes, this is how we create the body of mankind. You even look at the body of work that we see in the ancient sacred texts, and that's the body of work of the prophets, saints, mystics, and sages from throughout the world, from throughout all ages. Not one of those prophets could have done that, but all of them combined created this huge body of revelation from God. And it's a beautiful revelation altogether. I mean, separately, they're beautiful revelations as well, but when you put them all together after all this time, it's like a mosaic that's come together through the ages.
And
And
so
so
we can take what their lives were about and what they wrote about and see their path. And we can then kind of skip having to go through all of what it took for them to get to where they got to get to those higher levels by diving into their work. And then what kind of people like that are alive today that you know of?
yeah.
Like,
Well, and with the ancient sacred text, what makes it so cool is most of these writers were literally souls who were just finishing up here. They were literally getting ready to graduate the mortal realms, the earthly sphere. This is their last time here, and they're leaving their last words to humankind forever. And so each one of those ancient sacred texts is a fantastic and beautiful key to what it is that we need to realize in our lives here before we can go.
would you say Padre Pio is one of your favorite?
Oh, yeah.
Can you say a little bit about why Padre Pio is your favorite or one of your favorites?
Well, he's one of my favorites in part because I've seen him quite a few times, and I've been very honored in that. I still don't know how I pulled this off, but I didn't pull it off somehow. Somebody else did this for me, but like 20 years ago, somebody was able to get a nun who was going to San Giovanni Rotondo to purchase for me. I gave her the money, but she was able to get me this 3-volume set. I'll show it to you. Hold on, I'm going to show you.
I think I've had those in my hands before. Maybe not.
To show this to you because you still cannot get this anywhere. You can't buy this on Amazon. I mean, this is like 20, maybe 30 years ago, but this is all the letters that they have translated into English. And this is the letters of Padre Pio to his spiritual directors. This is the letters of him to his spiritual children. And this is to Raffaellina Serassi, who was one of his special children. And so, I've been reading his letters for years, and he was, a stigmatist, a mystic, a priest. He was the first priest to become a stigmatist and the first Franciscan priest, because St. Francis of Assisi was the first Franciscan to be a stigmatist, and I think he might have been the first stigmatist, and that was, quite a long time ago. And Padre Pio was a Franciscan in the Capuchin order in San Giovanni Rotondo in Italy, and somehow I got these books, and you still can't get them anywhere. I don't know why they don't make them available, because they're gold. pure gold.
How can we learn from Padre Pio, or what do you have to impart to us about the lessons that he's imparted to you through his works and through you visiting him?
You know what is amazing about Padre Pio? First of all, is discipline. Um, very disciplined. And this is a priest, this is a mystic who literally had fights with, Satan in his cell all the time. He got beat up many times, had to go to the hospital because he was fighting with Satan himself. I mean, crazy stuff this guy went through. He was a stigmatist. He had both of the hands, both of the feet, and he had the lash on the side. Um, he he showed me this vision I had years ago that's in the Mysteries of the Redemption about the mysteries of the Holy Mass. And it was the 54 steps, 54 mystical steps that occur during a Holy Mass. And he took me up these steps from earth to heaven, and showed me how the host comes to life. And because, in the Catholic tradition, we believe in transubstantiation, which is that the host becomes the real living flesh of Jesus Christ. And he showed me how that comes to pass. It was really awesome. And, he's one of the reasons, he's kicked my butt so many times. You'd think I wouldn't like him, but I think that's one of the reasons I do like him, because he doesn't. What?
He's not easily impressed.
No, and he doesn't mince words, that's for sure. So, when he comes to see you, he's very succinct about letting you know exactly what he needs to tell you. And, you can be pretty stung by his words, because he's going to come right at you with what you need to see. But it's one of the benefits of Padre Pio, and that's the way he was in real life too. I imagine it was pretty intense and pretty hard. And, they demonstrate this in some of the movies that they've done of his life, that it was because he had the gift of reading souls. So when some souls would come to him in confession, if they forgot a sin, he would remind them. That's because he would be informed. And so, so imagine, that's an intense thing to, so an intense Holy Spirit filled type gift there as well. And he took my family under his spiritual protection in 1995, which is a huge, profound gift. And he promised, to watch after all the souls in my family. And I've had many people who've crossed over since that time. And when I pray for them, it's interesting because one of the things Padre Pio promised during life was that he would, of all his spiritual children, anyone he took as a spiritual child, he would be there for their entire family. He would wait at the gates of heaven, and he would make sure every member of your family got through. And I'll tell you one thing, it was funny because my father passed away about 10 years ago. And my father was not Catholic, and none of my family was. I was a convert. And my father came to me like a few days after his death, and he said, "Who's this guy?" And he shows me, he's describing, and I was like, "Oh my God." And I said, "That's Padre Pio. Why are you asking?" And he said, "Well, this guy defended me in the trial, at his death." And I was so moved by that. Padre Pio defended him at his death. And then he helped my father through, a lot of purgatorial things he had to go through. And it's interesting too, because I had relatives of very close friends, and I would pray to him and I would say, well, this is This is my dear friend who I consider to be a sister. That's her mother. And so I'm assuming you're taking care of her. And he would come and he would say, that's right, I am. There's some books out there for anyone who wants to find out more about Padre Pio. There's a really good biography that I think people would benefit. I can try to look it up and give you the name of it. But there's also an Ignatius Press movie that does a really good job on him. The biography is really good. I guess there's more that have been put out, since this used to be the only one that was really out there years ago. And this was a great biography. I guess I'm going to have to say I don't know which one it is anymore because there's so many there. I'd have to look it up. There it is. It's Padre Pio, the Stigmatist by Reverend Father Charles Mortimer Carty. That one. And then there's, let's see, is this the movie? That's the one. Padre Pio, Miracle Man. And I think that's, it's on Prime Video for people who have Prime Video.
Mm.
That's really good.
I'm going to check it out for sure.
Very good movie about Padre Pio. He casts demons out of people right during Mass. They portray that as really well in the film as well. If you watch that one, you might also want to watch the movie they did on Francis of Assisi, because then you watch Francis, who is the spiritual father of Padre Pio, because Francis founded the Franciscans, and Padre Pio was a Franciscan several hundred years later. So he's just very special to me. He always will be. And I don't, maybe I don't have a great answer for why he just is,
I know that was very great. The way you did it, yeah, that was really good. So, one thing we touched on last time was self-forgiveness is a key.
Yes.
Right. And also, of course, out-of-body travel is a gateway, is a tool for us to use in our spiritual growth to kind of see what is real. And what
yes.
can you, so we're about to close for this podcast. And so what can people do tonight, right now, for themselves to help them in having an out-of-body experience tonight?
Well, what I would say is consider pulling out the readings from the Catholic Rite of Exorcism, which is on my website, and the Frequency of Otara. The Frequency of Otara is a CD, also was made based on a technique taught to me by the angels, which is, it mimics the process of having your vibration raised. And I have a lot of members who find this CD very helpful in helping them to have out-of-body experiences. So start with that and consider, like, maybe before you head off to bed at night, with the readings from the Catholic Rite of Exorcism, and going back to self-forgiveness, if you start feeling or have any kind of experience which shows you might have some attachments that are negative or dark, do not self-judge. Just simply rebuke them. So if you are shown, even if you're shown it's something really gnarly, I rebuke Baal, I rebuke Satan, I rebuke Leviathan, I rebuke whoever it is, I rebuke the demon of lust, I rebuke the ghoul, I rebuke the succubus, the incubus, I rebuke, if you know what your primary issues might be, you can rebuke those, you can just simply have a nice conversation with God and say, hey, I realize I'm really attached to lust, or I'm attached to my greed, I'm too greedy, or whatever. Can you please help me with these things? Don't get into feeling like you can't be forgiven. It's so important to remember that all of us can be forgiven. Mercy is the greatest attribute of God. We just have to approach him. And so even if you're shown something you don't like, rebuke it and just keep moving forward and keep praying and moving yourself where you're going to continue to push the things that are not serving your path, your spiritual path, away from you, and bringing those things that are going to serve your continuing movement forward towards you. So there's no judgment here. And this is one of the great things about the Buddhist path, is that you can focus more intellectually on cravings, fetters, things that are serving your path, things that are not serving your path. You don't have to judge it. It's like, okay, that's not going to take me where I'm wanting to go. And then so you don't waste a lot of time in guilt, self-judgment, and all these things that then become their own fetter. They become another attachment that you have to work on. So you just, oh, okay, I was shown this last night, so I'm going to ask God for his assistance and run that readings from the Catholic Rite of Exorcism, because those are the things that start detaching those critters, those things that are not good. And again, do not judge them, just start releasing them. Don't add more fetters by judging them, just releasing them, and continue to ask God for your help. Don't forget that God wants you to approach him and his mercy. Just do it. Don't, no matter what you might be struggling with, he wants you there. He wants you to approach. So do not waste energy and time in not feeling that you're worthy to do that. Just do it. That like gives you the accelerated path. You know what I mean? Save a lot of time that way.
That's great. So thank you so much, Marilynn. It's been such a pleasure again and an honor to have this conversation with you. And looking forward.
And you as well.
Next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Namaste.